Hello, this is Brian with the Bad Manners Podcast. This reaction video is going to be based on one done by Warren Smith of the Secret Scholar Society. The title of the video he made is Professor Stuns Audience with Argument for Positive Discrimination Against Whites. I'm already of the impression that the audience was probably not stunned because the audience is probably sympathetic to what he calls positive discrimination. But I'll touch on exactly how the positive part of that functions as this video goes on.
This guy is considered by many to be a progressive politician and professor. You are about to hear him make an argument for, I kid you not, positive discrimination.
It's the end of the pursuit of meritocracy as the goal. The United States Constitution, as written in its original
Positive discrimination is an attempt to create meritocracy.
Yeah, failed.
Okay, I should probably start it off pretty quickly. Discrimination is a behavior that we understand. It's effectively treating something differently than you treat something else. Now, when you see the word positive, positive means you're intentionally treating something different to engineer some specific outcome. So think of it as positive indicates intent. If you were to think of negative discrimination, it would be discrimination that happens not intentionally. So an example of negative discrimination is preferring the company of your friend over the company of someone you don't know. And of course, preferring to allocate your time with a friend might lead to outcomes for that unknown person that is less desirable to them than if you had been dedicating your time to them. So when this professor is arguing for positive discrimination, he is arguing that you, or should be, well, if you're, in this case, usually a white male, that you should be intentionally discriminated against to improve the outcomes for other groups. So this is an intentional targeting of a group. Now, he just made the comment that he thinks it's conducive to a meritocracy. Well, it violates the very idea of what a meritocracy is. A meritocracy would be simply who is the best that can do it. And toward that extent, it is a fundamentally colorblind concept. But by introducing this idea that you need to discriminate against a certain group to uplift another one, that's not a meritocracy you've engineered. It is something else entirely. But the reason that they attempt to attach it to meritocracy as a concept is leftists understand, because they're Machiavellian, they understand certain concepts are important to the average person that isn't already in alliance with leftist causes. So they'll attempt to bastardize the understanding of important terms or social practices in order to draw them more in line with their ideological purposes. And all leftists are concerned with pulling down the people they believe to be oppressors. Anything that is done to an oppressor by a leftist in their worldview is morally permissible. So this so-called positive, or better thought of as intentional discrimination against whites in particular, is to further promote their overall goal of dragging down the oppressors so that they can produce a society more in line with what they believe it ought to be. It is a method of striving for power via the demoralization and propagandizing of the host population. But let's continue.
Positive discrimination. What does that mean? DEI, the pursuit of equity. The idea that we must use quotas to force outcomes.
I think he made a small logical jump there. That is the form that it will take to achieve those. But really, positive discrimination is simply any discrimination that intentionally targets a group in order to, presumably, but not necessarily, improve the outcomes for some other group. Now, DEI and like that, those are just vehicles towards that end. But for those watching this video, think of this as just an educational thing. If you see positive discrimination, just know it's intentional. Negative discrimination, it is simply something that is not happening as a result of willful intent. If you're looking at this in the light of like criminals, it's the difference between murder and manslaughter.
The problem with this agenda is that it ends the pursuit of meritocracy as the singular goal for which we should be striving.
Notice the audience laughing at this. I don't know why.
You have to know why. That audience is full of leftists. They are amenable to the idea of it. I've said this in numerous other videos. The only two consistent features of the left are that they have a lust for power and they're envious. So they're envious of the whites, and that's why they feel that there needs to be positive discrimination in order to pull them down from this throne that they possess arbitrarily. Or if not arbitrarily, they possess it because of abuses that have been inflicted upon non-whites. So the other element, of course, is they have a lust for power. By pulling down whites, they believe they will be the ones sitting on the top of those hierarchies after they've achieved this social reorganization.
And instead reintroduces a new form of discrimination that advantages people not for their talents, not for their drive, not for their passion, but for the fact that they have a certain skin color, a certain set of genitals, or whatever else. It is completely antithetical to the goals of the West.
Right.
Before
you come in, I just want to ask one question so we can narrow it down.
Understand that the entire panel, except for Konstantin, are in favor of this concept of positive discrimination.
Do you recognize that there is a need to almost kickstart the process?
That's what she means by kickstart the process.
So that you have a more diverse and fair group that's doing the picking. You don't even
Absolutely not.
This method of kickstarting the lady's referencing would directly require the group that is currently on the top of the social hierarchy to surrender the power they possess and to disseminate it to other people. The great lie in the leftist ideology is that once this power is surrendered, they will rely on you to intuitively understand that, well, if you allow these other groups to access the same levels of power, they are in turn going to monitor this meritocracy in a colorblind way. And that is absolutely not how it'll actually function. But leftists don't care about the fact that that's not how it'll function. Their end goal in everything they do simply has to do with destroying the existing civilizational constructs in whatever group they understand to be the oppressor that runs it. And toward that end, they will use any argument possible, such as this whole idea of kickstarting it, in order to get you to cede power. They are the largest group of Machiavellians on earth, other than Muslims. Both of them are interchangeable when it comes to the fact that they will engage in any and all behaviors that are conducive to their acquisition of power.
By kickstarting, you are going to be choosing people and judging people based on their gender and race. How else are you going to kick it?
I don't think
under no circumstances.
I don't think there is any need to kickstart things. What there is a need to do is to make sure that people are not discriminated against because of the color of their skin or their sex or their sexuality.
And if it's an entirely...
So he is arguing for an actual meritocracy. Because as I said previously, those would be genuinely colorblind. And this is actually a rather magnanimous thing to argue for, because throughout the history of human civilization, including Western countries in the pre-World War II understanding of how the world works, these would not have been colorblind in the sense that foreigners could come in and achieve greatness within these societies. They would have been strongly in-group preferring and generally keeping outsiders out, being mistrustful of their overall intentions. I would argue that the people pre-World War II had a better understanding of human nature and how it worked. But it is important to realize that these three people he's arguing with, they don't really care about anything other than allowing opportunities for different groups to have more power. Because it's about power. It's not about their actual ability to perform just as well.
Let's use the historical example. Well, it might be white male group, or it could be black women doing the employment.
This is so fascinating to me. She throws in this example of black women to create the illusion of being unbiased. So if black women are hiring other black women, are you going to kickstart that and say, nope, you have to hire white women? Why are you bringing up this example?
They bring it up because, and I just referenced this earlier, they want to stock these positions with all of these different groups, and they want you to believe that they're going to in turn operate on a purely meritocratic basis. Because if you believe that, then you make yourself susceptible to what is actually going to occur. And that is, they would begin to select for their own in-group. And as their own in-groups come to occupy these positions, not because of merit, but because of nepotism and cronyism, they will gain relative social power, and eventually the former oppressors will be deprived of any positions of authority. It is all a long game. So it's a case of don't act confused by why they're doing this. They're using your intention of building a meritocracy to infiltrate what their ideology actually is.
And notice the woman sitting in the chair next to Konstantin looks up as she says this.
Well, it might be white male group, or it could be black women doing the employment, and there is a record that they tend to employ like them. You don't think that some external force...
What kind of external force? Should she...
Yeah, no. He's right to point out that if you're recognizing that they tend to employ for them, which is actually correct, we've seen data indicating that most people have an in-group preference for their ethnic group. The only ethnic group even remotely allowing for equal distribution being whites. They tend to be about the same on in-group and out-group preference. If you recognize this as a reality, the only way you can tamp down on this arbitrary body of people that are supposed to be administering a meritocracy would be to create more positions of power and influence, and those would be argued to be necessarily diverse in nature, which would increase the relative social capital of these groups that would not have social power otherwise.
Spelling it out right here. What would external force look like? She's not being subtle about this.
Shoving them in a different direction.
This is where meritocracy comes in.
So you're going to literally shove me in a different direction to hire people that look like you want them to look, because you think I'm hiring too many people that I like to be around. How could this go wrong?
I am an employer. I run a YouTube channel which employs 10 people. It would never in a million years occur to me to employ somebody because of the color of their skin or their sex, because I know that the only thing that matters is getting the very best person for that job. The very best person. And by the way, just so you know, we hired a woman to run the whole thing, and she fired all the other women. So there you go.
The notion of this colorblind meritocracy is a distinctly post-World War II consensus phenomena chiefly found in white-dominated countries. You don't really find these colorblind meritocracies in any other country on Earth that is either culturally homogenous or ideologically homogenous. They don't allow it because they'll mistrust those outsiders who, despite their merit, might begin to engineer certain social priorities towards outcomes that are not conducive to the host population. So, despite the fact that a colorblind meritocracy certainly has hypothetical tremendous benefits for civilization, it has effectively served also as a means by which leftists can attempt to wedge themselves into places of influence that they otherwise wouldn't have had access to if they can make you believe that, you need diversity as an important component of this meritocracy.
And this is the same thing I just went through with Brian Shapiro in that last debate. It seems so logical and obvious. I don't understand the resistance to that idea. How can you argue against hiring the person who is best for the job?
Because you are trying to create a better society for your understanding of how humanity functions. You are operating in an entirely different dialectic and with an entirely different value system than what any leftist possesses. They are locked in the oppressed-oppressor paradigm. That is their entire worldview, and they filter all human interactions through that understanding. That is why they combat against it. Because in their mind, those at the top of the social hierarchy, in this case typically white males, are viewed to be the oppressor. And because they're the oppressor, as the oppressed, they need to do something about that to create a more just society. Well, they'll call it a more just society, but the truth is their version of a more just society is where they're the ones sitting on top and can wield the power as they see fit. That's why they fight against it. Their ways are not your ways. When you're debating a leftist, they're not actually engaging you in intellectual exercise that is trying to promote a greater understanding of humanity and actually move humanity to a universalist vision of what is best for everyone. The vision for humanity that you'll find among somebody on the right is entirely divorced from the vision somebody on the left has. They are so mutually exclusive that you can't even have the Hegelian dialectic that would result in some kind of synthesis. They are simply incompatible.
It's literally all that Konstantin is saying here.
And what we have today in the modern West is a new framework of discrimination. We have decided that it is okay to discriminate against white people. It's okay to discriminate. Oh, you laugh. Well, let me give you some statistics. Fantastic, I enjoy that.
Before you give us some statistics.
Let me give some statistics.
You can come back
if you are Jewish or Asian or white, it is much harder for you to get into an American university because all of those groups are widely discriminated against.
One concerns this. Look, as an educator, many times.
I'm also an educator. Anybody that starts with as an educator, be on guard for some garbage that's about to follow. Even have that level of skepticism when it's coming from me, because far too many educators get high on their own farts.
In a class, there would be young people who, because of their disadvantaged background, needed more of my attention. Okay?
Well, we have a version of that in the United States. It's called RTI, Response to Intervention. This almost always obligates a teacher to dedicate far more of their time to the low-performing students than they ever would be providing to the higher-performing students. The great tragedy in this is, to what extent human civilization is pulled forward. It's not pulled upward by the lowest being brought to the middle. It's those rare individuals that are able to innovate in fantastically meaningful ways that actually change the trajectory of civilization. So despite the fact that educators, some of them feel an innate obligation to engage in this practice, some do it because they have to, because it's a need demanded by their profession, but it's equity in practice. And the funny part is, you can pour all your time into these low-performing students, but the biggest reason so many of them are absolutely low, it's the culture they're surrounded by at home. Far too often, I've seen students from well-to-do families do far worse than students from socioeconomically poor families, because the well-to-do family just doesn't care about education that much, and the more impoverished family drives the importance of education into that child's mind, and they reinforce and they do everything they can to drive that forward.
Because of their disadvantaged background, they didn't have the same tools that other kids did.
And this is what happens when you have this debate. They scale.
By the way, that whole reference to didn't have the same tools, welcome to why heterogeneous societies are disadvantageous to, host populations. Instead of the host population, which is presumed to be more advantaged because the society was built by them for them, you are suddenly asked to shift all your time to these other populations that are going to go through the difficult task of, well, ideally assimilating. Of course, to a leftist, that's a bad word, because an assimilated migrant is not a migrant that is going to be allied with leftist causes, because they will take on the characteristics of the traditional beliefs of the host population.
Split back into a completely different argument that you're not making. Konstantin was describing college admissions and treating them differently based upon the color of their skin.
Now, I gave them more attention.
The reason he did that, and his comparison actually does work to some extent, is he is making the argument that these less capable individuals should be getting the admissions over the ones that demonstrated better performance. The same practices he employs in the classroom, where he attempts to advantage those that are relatively disadvantaged, is something he wants to be systemically engineered for society at the upper collegiate levels. It is ideologically driven. It's not performative outcome driven. His entire ideology, which is probably derived from tabula rasa, blank slate leftist nonsense, because they have not and will never understand human behavior, obligates him to push for the antithesis of meritocracies. But he'll still attempt to use the word to trick you into feeling like you have some common cause with him in the debate, when really you are operating in good faith and they are not negotiating in good faith at all, and never were to begin with.
Which meant, because it's a zero-sum game, there are a fixed number of hours every day, that attention, extra attention, I didn't give to other kids that were advantaged or coming from the advantage group.
What does that have to do with how you designate your attention as a teacher based upon need?
And of course, disadvantage is highly correlated with gender, with races, with race, with ethnic background.
All those correlations he's indicating are simply a reflection of the reality that Western countries were built for Western people. This isn't some great mystery, and it's not something you need to feel bad about. And yes, it means migrants coming in are going to have a difficult time, but it's not supposed to be some kind of streamlined, facilitated process where the native population is asked to have less resources thrown at them because the newcomers are less advantaged by way of comparison. It's an asinine approach, and it's an approach that only leftists can come up with, even though all it'll do is drag that civilization down to some median that is lesser than what that civilization was before. You cannot improve a society by throwing more resources at the low than you throw at the high. It doesn't work.
To call this discriminatory in the pursuit of meritocracy is essentially to fly in the face of the facts.
If you want to make
that man has no idea what the facts are, and it is discriminatory in the face of meritocracy. By his own admission, he's spending more time on the disadvantaged than the advantaged. In a meritocracy, you would be giving the resources to all of them, and the outcomes that happen are what happens. You are intentionally, and it's positive discrimination, you are intentionally shifting your resources to a different population at the cost of another population. This isn't even passive discrimination. This is willful and intentional, which means in the pursuit of his professional practice, he already engages in positive discrimination. And there is no shortage of teachers that will believe that this is the correct course of action. In my own practice, no. I absolutely will not make it a point to spend far more time on the low performing and deprive the high performing at the chance they have to become even better than they already are. It is a philosophical divide between the right and between leftists.
This a socioeconomic argument, fine, but that's not what's happening when you're talking about doing it based upon immutable characteristics.
But very briefly, I did not.
Okay, you can come.
I did not call that discrimination. I was talking about admission.
He should have called it discrimination. It is actually discrimination. He is choosing certain characteristics and dedicating his time, which is the all-important resource an educator has, at those populations. It is positive discrimination because it is intentional. Too many people that are right-aligned try to give far too much credit to what leftists are doing, and in so doing, it emboldens and strengthens their arguments in ways that they shouldn't be strengthening them. So, the man on the far left should have pointed out that it is absolutely positive discrimination, and you are not doing the service you think you're doing. Yes, the groups that you're choosing to spend more time on that you believe to be disadvantaged because of their different backgrounds, yes, they're benefiting more from it, but you are discriminating against the other populations that are not receiving your time because your time is not being equally distributed because your ideology obligates you to discriminate. This is very different from a teacher that would try to distribute their time evenly across their students.
No,
when
I
we're
was
saying
talking about
in
admissions.
universities that
talking about
we are
admissions.
going to take people from a working class
I was
and therefore
talking about admissions.
And of course, he believes that because of his background, you don't have to worry about power in his hands. He will wield discrimination properly because he's enlightened.
the secret police broke down our door and abducted my father, and we lived in terror of a fascist dictatorship. So I know.
I am so sick of leftists and their virtue of the oppressed nonsense. He is attempting to derive moral validity from his argument, or for his argument, from the fact that he was oppressed at some point. Guess what? It endows you with nothing. It is immaterial to the discussion at hand. It should be rejected out of hand, and if you are running into a person that tries to argue that their oppression or supposed experience with oppression in some way endows them with a unique insight that gives moral virtue or superiority to their arguments, you have to dismiss that premise.
How to not see the world as us versus them.
Everyone thinks they're enlightened. That is exactly what you are doing. When you divide the world up into people by immutable characteristics and claim certain skin colors have power and others don't.
He already created us versus them when he decided his us included those disadvantaged groups that he was going to expend time on. There wasn't a universal constant. The man has no moral authority in his argument. Every single thing he's doing is an emotional appeal to get you to understand the good intentions of what he's doing. But again, all leftists are morally bankrupt.
And we must force positive discrimination upon those that have the power.
Just for a moment, consider the possibility that this us versus them, the West versus the rest, is the root problem, which...
They could just not be here. This isn't the West's problem. The West's job is to look after the people of the West. So if there is an us versus them, it's because to what extent they come here, they choose not to become one of us. We don't have to deal with this.
essentially condemns the West to the decline of the values, which may end up...
No. The values he's referencing are the post-World War II consensus values, and those should be jettisoned into the dustbin of history. Because those are the same values that have allowed for the proliferation of ethnic enclaves and the lessening of the moral and ethical frameworks that had helped the West rise to the prominence it had by the time World War II ended. So no, the whole idea that if we pursue this course of action, that it's going to make us less than what we were, we've already become less than what we were because we've adopted an entire philosophical framework that is not in the best interest of the people of the West.
With a bang, not a whimper.
But that is the very thing you are doing. I mean, the hypocrisy is remarkable.
I never for one time said that the rest of the world was uncivilized. I never said that the Chinese were uncivilized. The Chinese civilization is one of the most ancient civilizations in human history. The Indian civilization is one of the most ancient civilizations in human history.
This tack he's taking is putting him on the back foot and is allowing the horrible points that the other guy just made skate by. Do not give any ground on their reasoning. If their reasoning is flawed, you stay after it like an attack dog. Instead, he shifted to this defensive where he's trying to make himself look like I'm kind to everybody, or I have an understanding that is equally well treating of it all, and it's misplaced in this case.
The idea that I think Russia...
You said that our civilization is better.
It is better.
I do believe that the framework created by our founding fathers is nothing short of a miracle. The idea of the sovereign individual, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the pursuit of autonomy. We hold these truths to be self-evident. This was revolutionary. It didn't exist anywhere else. and it has succeeded remarkably. Yes, I believe that is better.
Don't mince your words now.
I am not mixing my words now.
Hold on a second.
The reason that guy can suddenly act as if he has any moral leg to stand on is because Konstantin elected to go on the back foot with the statements appealing to the historicity of, China and India.
Explaining to you exactly what I meant.
Civilization is better.
No, it's not.
Well, quite. So,
It really.
Every time I see some clown that's engaged in a forum that is clearly based to some degree on Western civilization, that decries Western civilization, all I can ever think is go crawl back into the hole you came from, in this case it's Greece, and just stay there and keep your head down. Because you are useless to the rest of us.
It's not.
You're insinuating there's something out there that is better. Can you point to what that is? Show me what is better than what we have created.
The Arab civilization saved us from the Middle Ages.
In the Middle Ages, we're talking about today.
Through the translation process, we wouldn't have the ancient Greeks. We wouldn't have the Renaissance without the Arab civilization.
But did I ever say?
The Jews lived far better lives in the Ottoman Empire.
Then go there. Go to those other countries if you think the West is so bad. People of the West have to stop tolerating these leftists. The enemy within is by far the worst one to deal with. They will sit there in a Western country and tell you to your face that the West sucks and make all these, engage in all this apologia for these foreign, empires or civilizations. But even though realistically they actually would not go live in them, because to do so would mean that they actually have to be logically consistent, and they never are. They engage in all this demoralization of the West so that they can further enhance their grasp on power for their ideology. Leftists are disgusting.
But we're talking 2024. Where would you choose to be born today?
In the southern suburbs of Athens, where I come from.
Really, after you just described how the secret police arrested your father when you were living under a fascist regime, you would rather live, that is superior than the West. You would rather live there than in the West. I mean, that pretty much says it all.
Because I'm a patriot.
Yeah, I would still be in the United States.
There you go.
Somewhere in the West, I haven't picked where yet. I'm waiting to see which part of it declines.
I'm going to go ahead and stop it there. People on the right, there is some value in debating people from the left. Just because to the onlooker you might start to plant the seeds of understanding that pull them away from the absolutely stupid, or more accurately put, Machiavellian approach to humanity that leftists all operate under. They have no moral character. They are not virtuous. Any and all behavior is permissible if it advances the cause of their ideology. They will lie to you if it furthers their cause. They will hold your principles against you if it furthers their cause. There is nothing positive to be said about any of the ideologies they adhere to. Once you recognize that the entire game for them is based on their lust for power because they envy those in a station above them, and when they combine those two, they're going to attempt to affect a world that's the utopia that exists in their mind, or the world they believe ought to be. A world that completely ignores how human behavior actually functions and can never actually be realized. If you are a person that realizes all of these flaws with all things related to leftism, then you understand the existential threat they pose to you, because they will never work in concert with you to make a better world. They seek your disenfranchisement. Other than that, this is, I believe, the second time I've reacted to a Warren Smith video. Please give him your support. I like that he engages in debates. My preferred method of debating, of course, is the written variety. I admire the people that can do it verbally. If you happen to like anything I said, like, comment, subscribe. Have a good night.